Right, so now that section is well and truly out the way, I think I've said pretty much everything I want to on the matter. Now I'm gonna expand on what I presented last video. I'm now adding in an additional consideration: the amount of health each character feeds per death. These graphs are going to be a lot less universally useful, but are still a good tool to understand the game and inform comp choices. A good general rule of thumb is that when one team wipes, the other team gains around 1 mid-efficiency ultimate worth of points, but that's a bit vague and hand-wavy. If there's 6 team fights in a game and they both end in full wipes, 3 for the attacker and 3 for the defender, if one team has a higher health pool than the other, the team with the lower health pool has an advantage by receiving more ultimate points in total. Each character feeds a different amount of charge points per death. Tracer feeds 150 due to her lower health, and Diva feeds the most with 750 due to her baby form, giving away an extra 150 points. All of this is going to continue to be a simplification in order to quantify the advantage in ultimate economy certain teams get per complete wipe, assuming that the ultimate points wasted is generally even on each side. In a normal game, everything is much messier, but in terms of the average advantage each team gets, we can still get a gauge of which comps are more efficient and which comps are more feedy. Using my example of dive versus double shields from the previous video, the dive team clocks in at 2000 HP per wipe, due to the inclusion of the 750 HP from Diva, whilst the shield team clocks in at only 1700 health, meaning that the ultimate economy tips further in the balance of the shield team by 300 points every time they win a team fight. So the dive team, as I went over last video, gets 33% more ultimates due to their efficient ult. But every time both teams lose an engagement in a complete wipe, the shield team gets an extra 300 points in charge. And as for the triple tank team in the last video, they clock in at 2300 health per wipe due to all the tanks in the comp. Hopefully that alone is enough to convince you that to really see which characters are efficient in ultimates, you need to take both ultimate cost and health fed per death into account. So I produced another couple of sets of graphs that combines ultimate costs to the charge fed per death, then a set combining ultimate costs with 2 deaths and 3 deaths. I've stacked the bar graphs so we can easily see the 2 contributions, and reordered them to make sure they stay in order of total, keeping the feeding contribution blue and ultimate efficiency contributions red. Yeah, so the wrong way round, I'm not changing them now. So each one of these graphs shows you the order of character efficiency if they die 0, 1, 2 or 3 times per time they generate their ultimate. It's a little more difficult and less straightforward to interpret these new graphs, so I'm going to give a couple examples. Let's say you're on a 2CP defending first point and destroy their team on the first fight, then get rolled over on the second attack. Both teams have done the same amount of feeding and the same amount of murdering. Which characters are more efficient in this situation? Well, you go to the graph of 1 death per ultimate charge and see that the Roadhog and Diva have shot up in the rankings, meaning that they are a lot more feedy in this situation than the alternative tanks such as Reinhardt and Orisa. So these new graphs are more of an amount you feed per death chart, and have to be chosen based on the amount of deaths you have per time you charge your ultimate. As a second example, let's say you're completely destroying a 2CP full hold, and kill the enemy team 3 times without them really doing anything. Your overall ultimate efficiency is best represented by my original graphs, in that the entire red bar needs to be filled up by damage, healing and passive generation. But we've all been on the other side, with your entire team feeding their brains out, and if they die 3 times before they get their ultimates up, in that situation the efficiency of your character compared to others you could have taken is best represented by the 3 deaths graph. Let's say I choose Roadhog. The game lasts 4 minutes and we get no kills because we were so shut out by a double shield comp. I get 1200 points of passive generation in that time, and so does everyone else in the game. My deaths feed 1800 points to the enemy, so before I've even started doing damage in order to build my ultimate, the enemy is on 3000 worth of 3 points. Then I need to do more than an extra 1040 damage or healing throughout the first round in order to get my whole hog before the game ends. Their team heals this damage up, and the grand total is that I get my whole hog at the point where the enemy team has 2840 points charged on top of passive generation from only me. Of this 2840 points, 1040 points of the damage gets healed up by their healers, and 1800 points of the damage goes straight into their DPS players' ultimate banks. So me and me alone on Roadhog have given the enemy team more than 2 pulse bombs worth of charge. On the other hand, if I chose Sombra and did basically nothing while flaming my Roadhog for feeding all game, let's say I just unstealth behind them and get flashed 3 times because I'm bad and I should feel bad, Passively, I would have generated 1200 points, and my deaths feed 600 points. The remaining damage I have to do is only 200 to get my ultimate, meaning that 600 points of charge go to their damage dealers and 200 to their healers. This is still feeding my brains out as much as I possibly can, but if I was on Roadhog instead, I would have fed 3.5 times as many points. Hopefully that's enough to solidify in your head how much of a difference one character pick on your team can make. The inclusion of Roadhog goes from being 1.6 times less charge efficient with no deaths to 3.55 times less efficient with 3 deaths. Now if you think about a general case, the average deaths per game is around 7 for most heroes. It seems to range between about 6 and 10. Depending on the character, and from my experience, the amount of ultimates charged by each hero per game ranges from about 5 to 7, so the most representative graph to use if you're thinking about general ultimate efficiency, and not a specific case, would be either 1 or 2 deaths per ultimate. Rarely there's going to be situations where the other graphs, the 3 deaths per ultimate and the no deaths graph, apply, but it's going to be a lot less often. If I go through the different categories just to show you what changes, healers in particular have no change whatsoever when the new measure of efficiency is taken into account. They're all 200 health apart from Brigitte, who is going to be the only one with decreased total efficiency because of this. If you look at the 3 deaths graph, it actually shows that Brigitte becomes less efficient than Lucio, but for all intents and purposes, when comparing healers between each other, just use the original graphs. I doubt anyone really cares about this enough for me to produce a only healer graph with extra feeding put on top. The DPS are all slightly adjusted, and the comparison between graphs is on the screen now. Obviously there are more 250 health heroes, which skews their results, and Tracer is as always the lowest on the meter due to her low health. Tanks are the most interesting due to their varied health pools when you take this into account. When you consider more than 1 death per ultimate charge, Roadhog comes out highest of all the characters, cementing his role as Feed Pig. His ultimate is the most expensive of the tanks in the game, at 2,240 points to charge, and his health feeds 600 points to the enemy team every time he dies. Diva has a reasonably cheap ultimate at 1,540 points, but feeds the most ult charge of any character per death due to her baby form. It nets her the second highest spot on the 3 deaths per ultimate graph, despite the really efficient ultimate. There's a couple more effects to think about. The chance of a character to escape a wipe makes them feed a lot less per teamfight. Given that Lucio, Tracer and Sombra aren't likely to die with the team, it seems a bit unfair that they get the full contribution from the feeding portion. I sure as hell don't plan on dying in every teamfight as Lucio, but on the other hand, if you look at the overbuff stats, Lucio seems to have a higher deaths per minute, so it entirely depends how much you and you alone are feeding. One final comment I want to make before signing off this video is that the passive ultimate charge generation always benefits characters with a low total charge points more than those with a high total charge points. As you saw in the example between Roadhog and Sombra, Hog had to charge an extra 1040 points after passive generation, but Sombra only had to charge 600. In all cases, character with low charge get a higher percentage of their bar from passive generation in a game, and benefit from it much more. It's a bit weird, as you might have thought Blizzard would want each character to passively charge ultimate percentage at the same rate, and not points, but this is what we got, be it by their design or by a complete accident. It's just a bit of a weird quirk of the point system I forgot to mention last time. Right, I really should let you get back to your DPS queue. I've been typing this for what feels like hours, and I was pretty far into this hole when I decided to stop and make a video out of what I had. I didn't realise how much there was to ramble on about, to be honest. So thanks for coming along to Theorycraft with me about ultimate charges again. I'll be around soon for another one, and I really appreciate you watching. See you soon.